Dr. Sharma, when you were talking about the Vedas being revealed to the
The seers, they're called rishis, yeah.
as full texts, it reminds me. I mean, I don't want to make a correlation because there's a lot of, richness in all of these traditions, and I don't want to.
Yeah, it's a very useful caution.
Yeah, I don't want to be reductionist, but it reminds me of the terma, discovery of terma in Tibetan Buddhism in the Nyingma tradition lineage, that people find tertons are people who find full texts, either physical or sort of hidden mentally. They are revealed to them of the teachings, of the Buddhist teachings. And I was wondering if you have seen or if this is in other traditions, or I was thinking that maybe in the West, artists say, I discovered this, this sort of appeared to me, this poem, or if there's another more kind of.
Yes, several elements are involved in this. Let me start with the last one. This is the distinction we are taught in our school, no? Early in our schooling, that we should distinguish between invention and discovery. Invention is something which wasn't there before and has now come into being. So a new product, plastic, is invented. But something which is already there and is then found and becomes a part of our consciousness, it is discovered. It is not invented because it was already there, like the law of gravity. So Newton did not invent the law of gravity. He discovered it. So when you refer to aesthetic experience, and we can also extend it to religious experience, we might discover something that is, bring it to the surface of consciousness, our own and that of others, with the realization that what you have discovered was always there. We may have this feeling about a scientific truth, about a moral truth, or about an aesthetic realization. And it may be a part of the humbling experience, the humbling we experience when we discover some majestic truth much greater than ourselves. And we realize that it only became known through us. We did not create it or manifest it. Or if it did manifest it, only in the sense that we made it available. And this might in part explain why the claim to the eternality of texts or certain realities is made. The other point to address is how texts which were concealed in some way may be discovered. And there is a whole Tibetan tradition around this. The difference between the Hindu view of Vedic transmission, which we discussed partly when we talked about Sanatana Dharma, is that the Vedas are always present. Now you might wonder what happens to them when the universe goes into occultation. It's the same issue of what happens to the universe. So it's not a linear continuity. It's a continuity with apparent break, invisibility involved in parts, continuity with periods of invisibility. In that sense, you might say they are eternal in the sense that a continuous series of like things is. A continuous series of like things, the Veda being repeated age after age. This is the correct philosophical position. And this transmission within the universe, when it becomes a human text, is oral. Normatively, always oral. Even today, it is the recited text which has priority over the written or printed text.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
So there's one major difference.
That's so interesting, because I think we've been taught so much to privilege the written word over the oral kind of tradition.
Yeah.
That's my question.
But the reason which is often given to explain why it was transmitted orally well, I'll be interested in the reaction it evokes. One explanation for this, which is often given, is that these texts, or many of these texts, were meant to be recited on ritual occasions. And there was the belief that the slightest error would invalidate the ritual or compromise its result. You might call this the magical element. That is why it was so important to get the text right. And that is why extremely detailed ways of checking and cross-checking the pronunciation were instituted, which are still in place, to ensure that not a single syllable is out of place. I don't know how you feel about the reason for it. Maybe almost, it's ritual if not magical. But it has produced a text which, as somebody said, is really some kind of a oral inscription. Just as a stone inscription remains the same over a vast period of time. With the same degree of stability, the Vedic text has remained the same over vast periods of time. This makes an interesting point of comparison. This provides an interesting point of comparison of the Vedas, which say the Quran or the Bible. And also another point of comparison regarding in what sense is the Holy Scripture eternal. The Quran is not obviously eternal in a sense because it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, but as emanating from God, who is eternal, it's in that sense an eternal text with God. And some such argument will have to be made, I think, for the Bible, as the way the copy of the Bible we have and so on is, of course, historically determinable. But what it embodies and the truth embodied in it, or the reality which it manifests, is eternal. So you can see how the same word carries such different connotations across the different traditions. But one might wonder, why do traditions insist that it is eternal? What do you think?
What do I think?
Why would traditions want to?
Because I think the religious sort of life is concerned with the unseen, or a lot of doctrine is concerned with the unseen.
Yeah, I think the reason could well be the claim that it is the truth. And what is true must always be true in order to remain true. Or in another key, what is real must always be real. And so what is true must always be true.